ACAB, an acronym that stands for All Cops Are Bad. But instead of bad, it ends with a different B word that rhymes with bastards. I have a rule to try not to use explicit language in my videos. I have many rules: using primary sources, listing my sources in the description, not misrepresenting the people I respond to, and steel manning the best argument. Society also has many rules, and those rules are enforced by cops. Don't murder, don't steal, don't injure. But when you are the enforcers of such rules, you tend to have a lot of power, and that power can be easily abused. And when that power is abused, people get hurt. Or worse, killed. This has motivated a lot of the sentiment behind the acronym ACAB, All Cops Are Bad. Maybe a police officer who is maliciously racist to black people starts targeting minorities more, starts using excessive force for minor crimes, starts exaggerating the severity of minor crimes, or even starts accusing them of crimes they didn't commit. In the midst of such an abuse of power, something goes wrong. Emotions run high. The minority gets defensive, the officer gets aggressive. He claims he's being threatened. He takes his gun, the trigger is pulled. At least that's what some people believe. America's history with race had created a popular perception that there is institutional racism within the police force. For instance, it is widely believed that the American police used the war on drugs as an excuse to target minorities by focusing more on drugs used by non-whites. There are also trust issues, as there are also concerns that the police can plant drugs on someone and frame them for possession. There are many more critiques of the police, but as you can see, they have a lot of haters.
I hate you, I don't even know you, and I hate your guts.
And the biggest haters of the police that I've seen are the ones that popularized the phrase ACAB, progressives and leftists. Many anti-capitalist leftists also consider the police as unjust enforcers of capitalism, favoring the rich over the poor. Some people even want to abolish or defund the police. Of course, the views of leftists on police are diverse, from allocating a certain amount of funds away from police and to things like education and healthcare, to alleviate poverty and theoretically cut crime from there, to outright disbanding the police. There are of course those who oppose this view.
People say to me, Michael, now, you gotta hate the police. I said, no, I don't hate the police. I have a wife, I have 5 daughters, I have grandkids. When they walk down the street, I want the police to protect them. I support the police, but I don't support the underhanded stuff that was done and that continues to be done. I'm sorry. I think the defund the police movement is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I'm totally against that.
That was a former mafia boss in a Jubilee video who sees the importance of law and order in protecting society. But he is also not blind to the excesses of the police.
However, there are situations that I'm very familiar with where they will use another criminal, to go into that, become a confidential informant, and he will help to manufacture a crime by getting people to say things that they wouldn't have ordinarily said, put them in a situation, bring them a criminal activity of some point and put them into it. So yeah, because they don't know what this other person is doing. I give you an example. Michael Francis, we know he's an organized crime guy. We got our informants told us that, but we haven't been able to catch him in a crime. So let's send somebody in there and see if they can create something to put him involved in. And then we have our crime. That's done.
Entrapment is when an undercover cop or informant tries to trick another criminal to agree to a proposed crime, and from that expose the criminal. For instance, a high-level member of the mafia family has been suspected of shady dealings and severe crimes. Murder, extortion, theft, torture, the stuff you see in mafia movies. But the police have no evidence that the mafia family member committed any crime. So they either have one of their own officers go undercover and infiltrate the criminal organization, or find a criminal within the organization and somehow make him a paid informant. Or her, I don't discriminate. Anyways, they send either the undercover cop or informant, and they will go to the alleged criminal and propose a criminal opportunity. Maybe it is to rob a bank. Maybe it is to harass a local business owner who didn't pay protection money to the mafia family. Maybe it is ordering a hit on a rival family member. And if the criminal agrees with and accepts the criminal opportunity, then the informant or cop will have all the evidence they need to put him behind bars. But sometimes entrapment goes a bit further than that. maybe rather than stopping at the admission of a crime, the informant or undercover cop is ordered to continue with the criminal opportunity because they may be able to find more criminals to participate in the crime, and that it will help their legal case much better if they catch them in the act. But one problem, it's an act that was created by the police, a manufactured crime. What if it wasn't a big time mafia guy, but some ordinary law-abiding citizen who a cop doesn't like? Maybe they can use entrapment to make the citizen say things they wouldn't have ordinarily said.
That's correct. But let me ask you a question. Here's somebody here who just, he's broke. He's got no money. No money at all. Never committed a crime in his life. Innocent guy. Okay, can't put food on his table. You don't like that guy. You know what? I don't like him. I don't know what to do. He's not a criminal, but I'm going to send somebody in there and give him some incentive. I'm going to send somebody in there to talk to this guy to tell him, listen, I have this jewelry store that we can rob. Don't worry about it. Inside job. Nobody's going to know anything. Okay, but come with me. We'll do it. Now you can put food on the table. So you created a crime. You manufactured a crime for a guy that never was in trouble in his life.
Alternatively, if we go back to the mafia example, maybe the informant or cop convinces the mafia family member to engage in a robbery and decides to hire 5 other violent criminals to complete the job. The informant, who suggested the idea in the first place, is tasked by the mafia member to lead this nefarious operation and does the work to hire these criminals, conduct the wire transfers to pay them, convince them to do the job, and plan the heist. But the criminals bring in guns. It's the day of the heist. A squadron of cops are scheduled to surprise the robbers before they step into the bank and check them for weapons. But while they are moving towards the bank, they are interrupted by a surprise shootout. They thankfully deal with it, but not long before the criminals openly break into the bank, gunning down 7 victims. The informant who was with them could do nothing. 7 lives lost because the manufactured crime was allowed to go too far. And the informant in this scenario actively helped with hiring the criminals and planning the heist. Through the misguidance of the informant and the police, they contributed to 7 lives being lost. Of course, there is a lot of debate on entrapment, and I am not making a definite point on entrapment. In fact, informants proposing fake crimes to powerful criminals can theoretically be a great way to imprison these guys and reduce organized crime. Someone isn't entrapped as long as they refuse the opportunity for crime. The whole point of me explaining this entrapment idea is that there are many potential problems with the police, and that I can see how progressives can have certain problems with the police. But these problems are not specific to just the police. Progressives/leftists have actually violated rights or engaged in unethical actions similar to the police because they believe it is for the greater good, maybe to end racism and other forms of bigotry or to help alleviate violence and poverty.
Shut it!
They sometimes act like the police or advocate for ideas that require more police intervention. Don't believe me? Well, here's a recent news story. An organization popular with progressives is the SPLC, or Southern Poverty Law Center. They have historically brought legal cases against far-right groups, like white supremacists. But this organization is currently in hot water as US Attorney General Todd Blanche, or however you pronounce his name, is now prosecuting the SPLC. According to this indictment, the SPLC claims to get donations from the public in order to fight against hate organizations like the KKK, but are actually lying and are funding the same organizations with the donation money, and hence are misrepresenting the use of that donation money, which is a crime. But what's interesting is the type of people who receive the donations. From 2014 to 2023, a member of the neo-Nazi organization National Alliance was paid more than $1 million. From 2003 to 2014, an officer of the neo-Nazi organization National Socialist Movement, an Aryan Nations affiliated Sadistic Souls motorcycle club, was paid more than $300,000. From 2016 to 2023, a former chairman of the National Alliance was paid more than £140,000. From 2014 to 2016, a leader of the National Socialist Party of America, former member of the KKK, and former director of a faction of the Aryan Nations was paid more than $70,000. From 2016 to 2019, a national president of the American Front and convicted felon was paid more than $19,000. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. The SPLC claims that the people who are receiving these funds in these hate group organizations are paid informants who are performing a valuable service in infiltrating dangerous racist organizations and providing valuable information to the SPLC, which they can use to counteract said hate groups. But two patterns emerge that can make people skeptical of this defense. First, many of these alleged informants were paid rather large sums of money, whether it is $300,000, $140,000, or even $1 million. That's a lot of money for mere informants. Do they need that much money? Is there something else going on? And many of these informants were really high-ranking members, like a national president of a racist American front, the chairman of the National Alliance, or a literal leader of the National Socialist Party of America. If the informants were used to counter these organizations, why were they in such high positions, coordinating the activities of these white supremacist groups? How were informants, who didn't believe in such hateful ideologies, get so lucky in gaining such powerful positions, while not being caught? To some, it would seem more likely that these were really racist leaders of such hate organizations, who made a deal with the SPLC to increase hateful activities or incite them, so that racism is so rife that it would increase donations to supposedly anti-racist organizations like the SPLC, who would then dishonestly use the funds to enrich themselves. If true, this would violate Title 18, Section 1343, which is the US Code, which includes someone defrauding or obtaining money under false pretenses by means of wire transfer. Although, it can be argued that these informants were usually paid these sums over 9 or 10 years, so when looking at the income annually, it isn't as big. So the National Alliance guys, being paid $1 million, would get around $100,000 per year, which maybe seems a bit more like an upper middle class income. And the $300,000 guy probably got like $30,000 per year, which is pretty average. Maybe them being informants was a full-time job, or maybe it is so dangerous being an informant that the large money is added compensation for such danger. Moreover, it can be argued, what is a better way to sabotage an organization rather than leading it yourself? Maybe these leaders were guilty about their racist past and want to atone for their actions and work with the SPLC to sabotage their organization and movement. There are a lot of details in this indictment, but I don't think we'll be able to find the truth soon until a trial happens. Still, the SPLC's actions seem pretty shady when you look at this. Individuals from the SPLC made fictitious bank accounts at financial institutions referred to in the indictment as Bank 1 and Bank 2. These were Central Investigative Agency, or CIA, Fox Photography, Northwest Tech, and Tech Writers for Bank 1, and Rare Books for Bank 2. By creating these accounts, they were accused of using these accounts to make it appear that the informants were receiving money from these fictional organizations, rather than from the SPLC themselves. Apparently the SPLC employees executed documents with Bank 1, which contained false and misleading information regarding ownership of the fake organizations/accounts, for the benefit of the SPLC. But in 2020, Bank 1 conducted an internal investigation into these accounts, causing an SPLC employee to close these accounts and ask that the funds be transferred to an account in the name of the SPLC. And this was backed by an email from multiple high-ranking members and leaders of the SPLC. It feels pretty suspect that the SPLC would go out of their way to create these fake accounts, hiding them from federally insured banks. This apparently violates Title 18, Section 1014, which is the US Code where you make false statements or wrong valuations for the purpose of influencing in any way the action of any institution whose accounts are insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Such deceit could very well be indicative of a conspiracy. Or maybe not. Maybe being an informant for a hate organization is so dangerous that you need to be secretive and take extreme measures. Whatever is the case, there's more. In reading the indictment, assuming what's there is true, I felt a pattern of the SPLC and its informants doing things that felt so unnecessary beyond exposing racist organizations. They've lied to banks about their money, paid surprisingly large sums to informants, and even paid leaders of racist organizations. And this is no less true for this final informant, known as F37 in the indictment. This person was a member of the online chat group that organized the rally. Well, not just any rally, the Unite the Right rally, Charlottesville. He attended the event under the direction of the SPLC in 2017 and even made racist posts as well as coordinated transportation for the event of several attendees. Again, under the direction of the SPLC. And he was greatly compensated. From 2015 to 2023, F37 received $270,000. Now, does anyone remember the consequences of Charlottesville? I'll refresh your memory. There was a far-right rally that brought in various white nationalists across America for a demonstration. They said stuff like, Jews will not replace us. They were pretty much present-day Twitter on steroids. But protesters also attended to oppose the rally. But one thing led to another, and a far-right individual drove into a crowd and tragically killed the protester Heather Heyer. Remember entrapment, and the example I mentioned before of the informant trying to entrap a mafia family member and some other criminals by manufacturing crime, organizing the crime, and then backfiring. Well, I think something similar here applies. The SPLC informant actively contributed to the Unite the Right rally by coordinating transport for people to get to the rally and also making racist posts. Now, attending a racist rally isn't a crime. I don't think the SPLC or the informant thought there was a decent chance that someone like Heather Heyer would die, and they wouldn't in any way be criminally culpable for her death. But like in entrapment, where informants attempt to give criminals an opportunity to commit the crime, the SPLC informant encouraged racists to be even more racist through their racist posts. And the SPLC encouraged racist extremists to gather and unite through their informants, increasing the organizational capabilities and numbers of extremists. Increasing the organizational capabilities and numbers increases the power of racist and extremist organizations. And racist and extremist organizations having greater power increases the probability of their hateful views being more popular. In other words, the SPLC informants, at minimum, risked making the problem worse, similar to entrapment, by going too far in their job as an informant. The point is, the SPLC, who progressives admire, do things similar to the police in terms of espionage and engage in similar unethical actions, with possibly similar consequences. Because just like a police officer, normal people are also vulnerable to crossing the line in the name of the greater good.
Shut it!
Now I just want to reiterate that I don't know how true the indictment is, and I think we need a trial to settle all of this. I'm merely trying to use the case of the SPLC to make a point. If you're enjoying this video so far, comment "all communists are bad," or your thoughts on whether you think the SPLC is guilty in the indictment, or comment anything else you want, as well as like the video to boost it in the algorithm and share. Anyways, this surprisingly applies to progressives, not just with the SPLC, but how in other ways they act like the police. And another way that leftists act like the police is through Antifa. Short for anti-fascist, Antifa is a movement of progressives who not only oppose white nationalist and far-right ideas, but also advocate for and use active violence against people they consider far-right, even non-violent protesters who they believe are far-right. They see it as justified in engaging in violence against Nazis, who are just speaking because, well, they're Nazis. They are an inherently violent and genocidal ideology, and that is true. But people have the right to espouse whatever ideas or beliefs they want in society, no matter how radical or evil they may be. Whether they be Nazism, communism, radical Islamism, or more. When Antifa engages in this violence, they engage in vigilantism. They engage in unaccountable violence. When police officers engage in violence, they are at least governed by lawmakers who are elected and funded by people in society. If the police is found to break the law / engage in unjustified violence, members of society can choose to not fund them or pressure lawmakers into firing them, even imprisoning the officer. The police are meant to arrest the accused, collect the evidence, and take the accused to the courts, where the courts will decide, based on the evidence, whether the defendant is guilty or innocent. Antifa members have no such safeguards, as their violence has no due process. Now you can say that the police can engage in unjustifiable violence, and I agree. But Antifa can have many of the same problems when they engage in violence that isn't self-defense. Vigilantes attack and or kill those who they deem to be immoral, whether they actually have committed the crime or not. These vigilantes may accuse people of being vicious criminals such as murderers or pedophiles. They may try to hunt down these alleged criminals. The problem is that their method of collecting evidence isn't necessarily verified and not checked by third parties. So there is a chance that the vigilante may target the wrong person. Similarly, the methods of collecting evidence by Antifa members may not be legitimate or verified. They too may falsely accuse people of racism or bigotry and engage in violence. The SPLC themselves illegally collected evidence when they had one of their informants who was undercover in the National Alliance to illegally break into the headquarters of an extremist group, steal 25 boxes of documents, arrange for the documents to be copied, and illegally break back in and put back the document. They lack the theoretical control and restraint that the police has from their rules and procedures. When the police conduct their investigations, they have the backing, approval, and training from society and the government. The police are told by the law when and how to collect evidence, when to interfere, and when not to. Since everything vigilantes do to fight crime is illegal, they don't have a clear line or rules to figure out whether they are engaging in excessive force. When a right-wing militia vigilante starts attacking someone who they accuse of pedophilia unprovoked, this is no different than when an Antifa vigilante starts attacking someone who they accuse of Nazism unprovoked. I think any leftists watching right now realize the danger of conservative vigilantes attacking anyone they accuse of sex crimes. Similarly, Antifa members shouldn't have that authority to attack anyone they deem an enemy unprovoked because of ideology. Obviously, if a Nazi is attacking you unprovoked or shows reasonable evidence that he is about to attack, you can use force to defend yourself or others. But Antifa doesn't always do that, if at all. I delve even deeper into Antifa in this Antifa video from last year if you're interested. What is interesting is how progressives can also advocate for things that can make the policing problem worse. Gun crime has been rampant in the US, and progressives rightly abhor such violence, and a proposed solution of theirs is gun control. Basically limit the type and amount of weapons that normal citizens can have. The idea goes that increasing restrictions on gun ownership will make it harder for people to access guns. This means less people will have guns, so less people will use guns to commit crimes or kill themselves. And if we focus on the type of guns being banned, we can prioritize banning more powerful weapons like assault rifles, so more lives will be saved. I'm not going to comment on the efficacy of this position for this video for now, because that's not the point of this video. But what I have noticed here is that gun control requires something. It requires people to enforce these restrictions, enforce citizens to not have certain guns. And who are those type of people? Police. Police with guns will take away people's guns. But do you remember the concerns of progressives who shout slogans like ACAB or have a negative view of the police? That the police may misidentify people, and in particular minorities, due to implicit biases and prejudices, target them more, and are more likely to arrest, harm, or even kill minorities. The more laws and legal restrictions you put in society, the more things the police have to enforce. The more opportunities for police to come into contact with the local populace. And the more opportunities for the police to abuse their power and kill a black man. An officer may catch a black man in the streets with a banned weapon. The black man argues that he needs it for self-defense because the place where he works is a high crime area. There aren't enough police in the area, but the racist officer doesn't care. He has his excuse. He starts using excessive force even though the black man was complying, so the black man physically defends himself. Then the officer gets his gun and shoots the black man down. Now, this isn't to say that the position of gun control is automatically wrong, or that all leftists even support gun control. Some actually prefer guns for a revolution. Ain't that nice? But it does mean that if you happen to be a progressive that has anti-police sentiment /ACAB, and that you want to enforce gun control, then I would advise that you either reevaluate your position on the police or gun control. Because as I have demonstrated, there is a massive contradiction between these two positions. Of course, more moderate progressives believe the police can be reformed rather than abolished, so these moderates would be more consistent with the idea of gun control. But gun control does still require the police to enforce. I mean, if Nick Fuentes realized this, he would be aroused by the amount of black men theoretically being killed by gun control enforcement. Or maybe he would be aroused by fornicating with black men like the red pillar Myron Gaines. I can't tell with that guy. He may start to love grabbing guns more than grabbing male genitals. But what's even gayer than Nick Fuentes is rent control. Rent control is one of many economic interventionist policies posed by leftists to protect the poor. For instance, New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani wants so-called progressive solutions for the housing market, such as rent control, where the government prevents landlords from raising rents to a certain price level for certain or all properties. But again, just like with gun control, increasing the laws and legal restrictions require police. And this increases police interactions with people owning rental properties, which increases the probability of police brutality. Then again, leftists probably won't care about the livelihood of landlords, unless maybe if they're black. That would be a fun controversy to see. Police kills unarmed black landlord because he refuses to charge lower rent prices. The political media reaction to that would be hilarious. Regardless of whether rent control will kill black landlords, there are actually other problems with rent control that I've talked about in previous videos, which you can check out. Anyways, I think I've covered how progressives could manifest the same problems as the police. If you've enjoyed that video, please give a like and comment, as it really helps my video in the YouTube algorithm. I'm also curious what you think of my new audio. Feel free to be as brutally honest as you want. I'm cooking up some new video ideas, maybe one with Hassan Piker, Richard Wolff, or even Tucker Carlson. Hassan and Tucker have been losing their mind lately, but yeah. Thanks for watching my video, and I hope you have a blessed day. Bye.